Okay, so let's discuss the candidate response booklet for paper 1. All right, so this will give us a very good idea how and in what ideal way can we attempt the paper so that we get as many marks as possible. Okay, so this is the guide to the document on how to read it. So we'll just start. Okay, now before we actually do this, we should also look at the syllabus ones for the keywords. If I go to the very last part of the syllabus, there is a list of keywords that you need to be well versed with. I'm pretty sure all of you remember these by now, so they must be on your fingertips. Okay, so whenever the most frequent ones are describe. So here you have to state the points and give the characteristics and the main features. Then the other one could be evaluate, where you have to give both sides of your opinion. So you have to calculate the quality, the importance, etc. Explain. Then you have to give the purpose or the reason and how to support with relevant evidence. Okay, so you cannot just write one point to get the explanation correct. So you have to give some supporting evidence as well. Then there is the keyword state. State, you just have to write one liner. And then when they ask you to compare and contrast, so here you have to do both things. You have to comment on the similarities and differences. Okay. All right. Now we move to the response booklet. Here we go. So they're saying complete the following table to describe the two terms. So this is a 2-mark question. So you just have to give a basic description. And what is a pixel? So pixel is the smallest picture that can be drawn. Okay, so you guys know that is clearly not correct. And I'll just shift through this. Okay, you don't want to spend too much time. Okay, then the calculation is correct. So 1024 times 512, and the color depth is 8 bits per pixel. So this is what they've done correctly. Okay, now one thing to keep in mind is that some of the examiner reports say that it is better to not cross out the values in calculations, right? This avoids confusion. So I know this is the first thing that you want to do given how we do it in math, but still try to not just cross the values. If you want to cross them out, just do it in a separate space here, maybe. Okay, but not within the answer space. All right. And then for RLE, so they get 1 mark for the identification of RLE. Okay, now let's say if you write something else here, let's say you write run length, you just write run length. Okay, so since the name is wrong, you would not get marks for the description as well, even if the description is fully correct. So they've written the character will be stored once, followed by the times it occurs, and then they have not referred to an image. Okay, so the question previously, the context, again, like I keep on saying, the context is very important. The context is image, and here what they're doing is they're explaining the run length encoding. So even the question says image, but here they have explained it in text, so that is why they do not get the mark. So the most important word that I always mention is context. That is very important. Whatever the first 2-3 lines of the question are, you have to include them in every part of your answer. We can skip this. All right, so this is a 2-mark question. So they have written that copyright is a legal recognition of ownership of a software or something. So they do get 1 mark till this point, but this is vague, so they do not get any mark for this. And how could they have improved? They could have added a second statement to describe what was meant by copyright, right? So 2 points were required. Then this is someone who got average marks. So they're saying a tiny recognized area. Now they do not get a mark because tiny is a vague word as written here. Okay, and then they're saying it contains the header contains information about the file, for example, type of compression used, which is not a file. So okay, so file header is not a file, so that is why they get 0 marks. So you can see, even though some of the answer is correct, but since this first keyword is wrong, so the whole answer is wrong. And then yeah, we've discussed this. Okay, moving on. Let's talk about this question. So hexadecimal 23, 2's complement is this. The denary number 10 needs to be subtracted. So they're saying conversion of 10 is clear. Okay, so they have done this. Then the candidate used the method of direct subtraction and carry bits are clear. So this is also done. Okay, now one thing to remember here is that whenever we have binary addition or subtraction, you get 1 mark for writing carry value. Okay, so if you miss out writing the carrying value, you will be losing 1 mark. So they've done that, but their final answer is wrong. So that is why they do not get the mark. Okay, then for copyright, they're saying that intellectual property, so they get 1 mark for this, and for the remaining 3 lines, they do not get any mark because they've written cannot be copied or action can be taken because it is considered as piracy. Okay, so action can be taken is not enough, right? Because uh, when we're talking about copyright, you have to define that it is protected under a law. And copyright, when you infringe on copyright, only then you can actually make a case about it or a lawsuit about it. So this is again vague. How could they have improved? Made 2 points, where the second one could be more precise. So same thing here. Same thing. So this is somebody who got low marks. And let's move on to the next one. Okay, so this is a simple uh, question from the software topic. Okay, so let's see. Identify 4 management tasks that OS will perform. So it will perform resource management. Okay, this is fine. Then memory management is fine. Then device. Okay, this is wrong. And then security. Now, why is this wrong? Because device and resource are the same thing. So there is no distinction between them. So the correct management, but device management and resource are the same, so it cannot be awarded a mark. See, so losing marks are very simple terms. Then they have written storage management, which is not a keyword. That is wrong. And then they have written here file management, security. Okay, they've written system and data. So you see, this is again very vague, and you never get any mark for writing vague statements. They have to be exactly to the point. Okay, then we have a question from the hardware topic. Okay, so let's see what is wrong in this part. Okay, so in the assembly language question, whenever you're given this table, remember that in the output, they say output to the screen the character whose ASCII value is stored in the accumulator. Okay, so whenever we have to output the value, we never put quotation marks in the assembly language question. And since they have done that, they lost 1 mark, even though the output is correct. Right? So, and the second mark was awarded because of the error carried forward. So this is also applicable in CS paper. This is done correctly. All right, now let's look at somebody who got the average mark. So here they are saying the instruction is a compare instruction, does not produce any output. So if you look at CMP, what does CMP do? It's always given to you in the exam. So CMP will compare the contents with the contents of the address of the accumulator. So it's not going to produce any output, or it won't change any register or any flag at all. Okay, so you're not supposed to write anything in the CMP instruction. And then the student has written end literally, so you're not supposed to write end anywhere. Then this is somebody who got low marks, and you can clearly see their table is kind of empty, so they have not done much. They only got 1 mark for this accumulator column. Okay, now the question says identify the mathematical operation that the following instruction will perform on the contents of the accumulator. And what are they doing? They're saying it will shift logically n places to the right so that the numbers 3 bits lagged introduced by etc. So this is literally a 1 mark answer, which means it should have been mostly a one-liner with 1 point. And the point would have been that since we are doing shifting to the right by 3 bits, so that means division by 2 raised to power 3, which is basically 8. And when you're doing left shifting, so that is multiplication. Then we move on to a bit more wordy questions and answers. Okay, so the question is saying describe the key features of a P2P network. Okay, now this is somebody who got high marks. So let's see what they have done. So they have written instead of having a centralized server, all the nodes are connected. Okay, and then if she wants to download a file, she will request from her peers. Okay, so everything is written here and all the keywords are there. Then describe 2 drawbacks of using P2P. Now, when we have 4 marks here, so the format would be that you will write 1 point and then you write 1 description. then you'll write the second point, and then you'll write the second description. Only then you can get 4 marks. So it's easy to get hacked, but this is not enough. So they have given an explanation as well. They have written that someone with malicious intent can send over viruses on the network. And then secondly, if one node fails, the user might not be able to finish downloading. This is because the node contains part of the file, and then bandwidth can also cause an issue. So this, they cover everything very nicely. Now we look at someone who got, okay, so let's move on to the average part. This person got average marks. Okay, all members are connected to each other and considered equals. Okay, somewhat big, but they get marked for this. They can access all the data from each other. Okay, this is fine. Then in the second part, they are saying a peer-to-peer network becomes harder to manage as the network expands. The more the peers are added, more complex the system gets. Okay, so now if you look at the comments, it's saying harder to manage is not enough to be word of mouth. The word harder does not match to difficult. It only shows that it is more complex to manage as the number of computer increases, right? However, it would still be simple to manage. So just because the nodes are increasing doesn't mean that it becomes difficult. And similarly, they're saying it is less secure and relies on trust and can carry out malicious attacks, etc. Okay, and then they're saying malicious attack on the other peers or accidentally introduce malicious software into the network. So the comment says that the candidate identifies reduced security, but their supporting statement is not enough for the mark. And they're saying that a peer could carry out malicious attacks on the other peers. Okay, so this is again vague, so not good enough. And let's look at their attempt on this question, World Wide Web. So explain whether Melinda is using internet or World Wide Web when she's accessing her email account. So World Wide Web to access Vmail, both of which are connected to the internet. Okay, so the candidate does not explain how the internet and World Wide Web are used to send the email. Okay, so they missed out on the explanation. So they lost the mark. So internet is basically a network of networks, and World Wide Web is a collection of web pages, and then you use the internet to access the collection of web pages. Now this is somebody who got low grade, so you can clearly see in the description question they have not written much, but they have definitely identified the points. So it is difficult to manage many computers in the P2P network. Okay, this is fine. It is loss of centralism, security. Okay, this is also fine. But since there are no descriptions, so they only get 2 out of 4. And okay, so these are the comments, how they could have improved their answer. So stating how World Wide Web is used, you need to apply all the same on the wide network, second feature of P2P, etc. Okay, now common mistakes. So some describe the bit-torrent protocol rather than a network or confuse a P2P network with a mesh topology. Okay, so we have to be very careful with these definitions. Then this is someone again with a higher grade. So embedded systems, RAM and ROM. Okay, so now they're asking the washing machine uses RAM and ROM. What is the purpose of RAM and ROM within the embedded system? So they are saying that RAM will store the currently running instructions. Okay, and in the second point, they are saying stores boot up instructions of the embedded system. All right. Then in the part C, so they're asking how the system in the refrigerator is a control and monitoring system, and you have to read the context as well. So they got full marks for this. Now they've used the word actuator. Then they've used the word preset values, temperature sensor, and feedback. So all the right keywords are there, so they get full marks. Then we have someone with the average mark, so we can skip to the low ranking student. Okay, so embedded system is a small piece of system. Okay, small piece that can run independently with simple instructions. Okay, 0 mark. So again, the rest is also 0. Okay, RAM is used to store the current running process. Okay, ROM is used to store the initial system of washing machine, like the BIOS and the operating system. Okay, so here they're talking about a washing machine embedded system. Okay, so it's uh, supposed to be a very simple embedded system, so there's no need of BIOS here. And then system and refrigerator. Okay, so this is also done. Okay, no, sorry. I think so. This was correct. No, this is wrong. So they're saying RAM is used to store the current process or the task of washing machine, and is also used to store the next in waiting purpose. Okay, so this is all taken from the context of a computer. So embedded systems are very simple microcontroller machines. Okay, so you're not supposed to write this. That was wrong. Wrong part is correct. Then you have the validation check. So this was somebody who got average mark. So range check, presence check. Okay, here they have written select data from the list. Okay, so this is not a verification check and it's also not a validation check. So this is wrong. So just a quick recap in verification, we have double entry and we have visual check. And these are basically the type of verification, and then check digit can also count as one, but this is the one we use mostly. And then again, we're back to someone with the high scoring paper. So Kim uses a file-based approach that's better than relational database. So they have mentioned data integrity is reduced as it needs to be updated more than once. Okay, this is fine. And then they have also mentioned data redundancy. So they get 2 marks because they mentioned 2 points, right? Then we move on to the next one. So this is also correct. Okay, they're saying give 3 items that are stored in a dictionary. So they're saying validations. Okay, so validation is incorrect. So that is also wrong. How they could have improved? So in part A, they could have identified a third reason, which they obviously missed. Then this is someone with an average grade. So a file-based approach can have many problems such as data privacy, redundancy, integrity, etc. And then it can improve privacy. Okay, relational database does not need to be reprogrammed each time. Okay, so this is not correct. So they do not get any mark for this. Then we have 1, 2, 1. Okay, so relationships are correct. All right. And then in 6 and 7, so 3 items stored in data dictionary. So they're saying there is going to be queries, okay, data, and then information about the data. So you guys can clearly see this is all wrong. And then finally someone with a low grade. So here they have written, okay, so they've written points and that is fine because it's still in paragraph form. So they've written data are stored once, which save money and time. Okay, so this is not enough. All the data in the database will be available on the other, so prevent. Okay, this is again 0. And then they have mentioned again needs database are connected present, so this is again here they have inside the database all connected, primary key and the font key. Okay, so primary and font key is there, so you get 1 mark. And then we move to the last one. So here they have again written how to create open, so this is all wrong because it doesn't answer the question. And then we have these table questions, so they are very easy to mark. Okay, even if you get something wrong, you can just cross it properly like this, and then you can write your answer, and it should be written very clearly so that the examiner does not get confused that whether you intended to write this or not. And that's it. This is all of paper 1's candidate response booklet.